This is the day we have been given, and let us be glad. Good morning and welcome everyone to online worship at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Abhi Janamanchi. My pronouns are he, him, one of the ministers serving this religious community with my colleague, the Reverend Kendi Romano Griffin. Please know that whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are joining us from, whatever your beliefs, gender identity and expression, or immigration status, or life circumstance, we welcome you to our worship this morning. I extend a warm welcome to all our UU siblings from River Road Unitarian Universalist Congregation and my colleague, the Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd, who are joining us in worship today. We are here together online, our two congregations, strengthening relationships, deepening our spiritual lives through community connection and service, and making love work in our lives and in the world. This is just the beginning of a partnership that is going to be explored more deeply as the year progresses between River Road, Cedar Lane, and Fairfax, to explore and engage in shared ministry together, sharing resources, doing things together, exploring that ancient principle of congregational polity, interdependence, and trying to be engaged in the work of growing and promoting Unitarian Universalism together. I look forward to more opportunities working with all three congregations. If you're joining us for the first time today, please let us know in the live chat. If you're new or feel new, you're invited to complete the newcomer form that will be linked there. And our pastoral visitors, who are an extension of the ministry team, are available in the chat today to support you. This morning, I have a couple of quick announcements. On Tuesday, August 11th, I will be facilitating a conversation with the Reverend Barry Lynn, former Executive Director of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, about his upcoming book, You Don't Know Me. So if you're curious about what that means, come find out on August 11th. And then on Sunday, 2 Sundays, August 16th and 23rd, from 2 to 3:30 p.m., my colleague, Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd, and I will be hosting a 2-session orientation to Unitarian Universalism. If you're new or feeling new or would like to renew your understanding of Unitarian Universalist history, theology, spirituality, and practice, we welcome you to take this class. Also, a quick save the date, August 26th, we will be hosting our Kiplinger lecture, which is an annual lecture, with Dr. John King, former Secretary of Education in the Obama administration. More information can be found on our website. At this time, I invite you all to take a moment to say hello to your neighbors in the chat, introducing yourselves and where you are joining us from. Let's greet one another.
Good morning. I'm Jessica Sawyer, today's worship associate. My pronouns are she, her. I'm lighting my chalice in Rockville. I invite you to share in the chat where you're lighting your chalice. Please join me now in reading our chalice lighting words. In remembrance and memory of Congressman John Lewis and the Reverend C.T. Vivian. We kindle the chalice in memory of those who have gone before us, who rose against tyranny and oppression, systematic racism and injustice, who were committed to the way of peace, the way of nonviolence, the way of love. Never, ever afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, and led the way in promoting justice, equity, and peace to build the beloved community where we are all welcome.
Well, folks, this is it. My final Sunday. I'm Tim Atkins, and for one more day, I am serving as your Director of Lifespan Religious Education. I've learned so much these past 3 years serving as your DRE, and I hope you've learned a lot from me and with me. I have full faith in the future of the RE program here, and I know Dana is going to do a superb job this upcoming year. If you want to hear more about my big picture thoughts on religious education, check out the service I led a couple of weeks ago, archived on our YouTube page. But today is for goodbyes. Part of best practices in saying goodbye is that you won't be seeing or hearing much from me in the coming years. You will see me take a step back on social media if we were friends, for example. This is to help give me the space I need to develop those relationships with my new church. And this is to give you the space to develop those same relationships with Dana. I will still be able to be reached by the staff team and members of the family ministry team to answer any lingering transition-related questions. But for the most part, this is goodbye. I know it's not easy to say goodbye. It certainly isn't for me. We've built real, deep connections with each other. I'll miss each and every single one of you, and thank you for welcoming me into your lives these past 3 years. It's not a gift I ever took lightly. I sincerely wish all the best for you in the Cedar Lane Religious Education Program in the years ahead. Keep the faith alive, folks. Dorothea and I will be rooting for you from afar. Dorothea would like to take a chance to say goodbye as well. Mwah. And I'm happy that this particular story will be my final time for all ages with you all. Because in the end, it's about two things I hope continue on at the Cedar Lane Religious Education Program. A focus on anti-racism and multiculturalism, and a focus on family-based ministry. With that, here's how to raise an anti-racist baby. It's been an honor serving you these past 3 years. Our story today is Anti-Racist Baby. Written by Ibram Kendi, illustrations by Ashley Lukashevsky, and published by Kalikia Press. Anti-Racist Baby is bred, not born. Anti-Racist Baby is raised to make society transform. Babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There's no neutrality. Take these 9 steps to make equity a reality. 1. Open your eyes to all skin colors. Anti-racist baby learns all the colors, not because race is true. If you claim to be colorblind, you deny what's right in front of you. 2. Use your words to talk about race. No one will see racism if we only stay silent. If we don't name racism, it won't stop being so violent. 3. Point at policies as the problem, not people. Some people get more, while others get less, because policies don't always grant equal access. 4. Shout, there's nothing wrong with the people. Even though all races are not treated the same, we are all human, anti-racist baby can proclaim. 5. Celebrate our differences. Anti-racist baby doesn't see certain groups as better or worse. Anti-racist baby loves a world that's truly diverse. 6. Knock down the stack of cultural blocks. Anti-racist baby appreciates how groups speak, dance, and create as they choose. Anti-racist baby welcomes all groups voicing their unique views. 7. Confess when being racist. Nothing disrupts racism more than when we confess the racist ideas that we sometimes express. 8. Grow to be an anti-racist. Anti-racist baby is always learning, changing, and growing. Anti-racist baby stays curious about all people and isn't all-knowing. 9. Believe we shall overcome racism. Anti-racist baby is filled with the power to transcend, my friend, and doesn't judge a book by its cover, but reads until the end. And doesn't judge a book.
Thank you, Tim, for that wonderful story and for your service to Cedar Lane. We will miss you, and we wish you the very best, you and Dorothea, on your journey as you travel to Oklahoma City to begin a new chapter in your religious education ministry there. Each Sunday at Cedar Lane and River Road and Unitarian Universalist congregations across the country, we give and receive an offering to support the promise and practice of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The offering is a visible symbol of our commitment and our covenant to our faith, to our religious community, to each other, and to our world. Our offering reminds us that our congregation belongs to us, to each of us individually, as well as to the whole of us. It is a weekly embodiment of the idea that a group working together to promote love and to promote justice is more exponentially powerful than any one individual. Today, we share the plate with Showing Up for Racial Justice, Montgomery County. To learn more about Surge's mission and work, let's hear from Cedar Lane member, Dr. Laurel Hoa.
Hi, Cedar Lane family. Thank you so much for sharing the plate with Showing Up for Racial Justice, or SURJ, today. SURJ is a national network of chapters devoted to undermining white support for white supremacy and dismantling racism at the direction of people who are most impacted by it. SURJ was specifically started to call white people into this essential work in accountable ways. SURJ recognizes that in order to be an effective anti-racist, both internal and external work is required, and neither is sufficient without the other. Because our culture is based on white supremacy and specifically anti-Black racism, it is impossible to live in this culture and not be affected by that. That means that, especially for those of us who are white, it is imperative that we educate ourselves about race, racism, white privilege, white fragility, and white supremacy culture as we dedicate ourselves to anti-racist work. But self-education alone is not enough. We must also act to dismantle systemic, institutional, and structural racism in all spheres of life. SURJ believes this action has to be directed by people who are most affected by racism in order to ensure we are not unintentionally perpetuating inequities. So we are in accountable relationships with organizers and organizations run by and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And these organizations set the direction of our work. Thank you again for your generous offering, and I hope you will commit to doing both the inner and outer work of being an anti-racist with us.
Thank you, Laurel, for that inspiring message about Serge's work. Friends, you can give by the electronic means of our modern times, by text or online giving, PayPal, QR code, or by that ancient spiritual practice of mailing your check to the church. And you'll see all that information on chat, both for Cedar Lane and River Roaders. Our offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Stand on the rock of freedom, stand on the rock for justice.
Stand on the rock for liberty, we must stand up on the rock.
Stand on the rock,
Stand on the rock, stand on the rock for liberty, we must stand up on the rock.
we're taking a stand against all hatred and greed. We must stand up on the rock.
And showing compassion for those in need, we all must stand up on the rock.
For peace in all places where there's conflict and war, we must stand up on the rock.
Respecting all people for who they are, we all must stand up on the rock.
Stand on the rock.
Stand on the rock for freedom, let it ring stand on the rock for liberty, we must stand up on the rock. Oh, rocks don't fall on me. Oh, rocks don't fall on me. Oh, rocks don't fall on me. Rocks and mountains don't fall on me.
Stand on the rock.
Rocks don't fall on me. Stand, oh, rocks don't fall on me. Rocks and mountains don't fall on me.
Stand on the rock.
Stand on the rock for liberty, we must stand upon the rock.
Stand on the rock. Stand on the rock.
Stand on the rock, stand on the rock, just stand upon the rock.
Stand on the
Stand on the rock, stand on the rock, just stand upon the rock.
Stand on the
Stand on the rock, stand on the rock, just stand upon the rock. Stand on the rock for liberty, we must stand upon the rock.
In the words of the Reverend Lynn Unger, through the works of our hands and the work of our lives, our love is made real. May we be grateful for all the ways in which our communities present us with ways to make love real in our lives and in the world. Let us center ourselves now, inviting our mind, body, and spirit into this space made sacred by our presence and the presence of the holy, known by many names, in which we live, move, breathe, and have our being. In this sanctuary of caring that connects us across space and time, across congregational walls, we hold in our hearts those for whom parenting is a primary spiritual practice, those who are mourning a loss, those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental illness or addictions, those who have suffered abuse or injustice, those who have experienced job loss or face financial insecurity. Within our Cedar Lane and River Road communities, we mourn the passing of beloved Cedar Lane member Mary Butler of a sudden illness on July 29th. She was 90. The memorial service will be held on September 5th. We hold the Knocktree family and their lifelong family friend Jim Frank, who is approaching the end of life after a short battle with cancer, in our hearts, and we pray for a peaceful passing, free of pain and worry. We hold Susan Modak and her family in our hearts as they mourn the passing of Susan's mother, Nancy Buell Fries, on July 30th. Our hearts are with Marianne Crayer and her family, who are mourning the loss of her mother, Mary Sullivan Crayer, who passed away this morning in a nursing home in Southwest Virginia. Mary was 96 and had a long life full of service. After the loss of Marilyn Halprin earlier in the spring, River Road is preparing a celebration of life service in the coming weeks to honor and celebrate her dignity, grace, and unique artistry in the world. And we send healing wishes for a full recovery to Vana Heaton's 83-year-old mother in St. Louis, who tested positive for COVID-19 and has pneumonia. Our caring extends beyond Cedar Lane and River Road to others whose lives are lost and whose lives are impacted by violence, calamities, and the COVID-19 pandemic in our nation and in our world, that to date has taken the lives of over 686,000 people worldwide, including over 156,000 people in the US. Holding them, holding all their loved ones, holding all the joys and sorrows we bring, let us now join our hearts in prayer, reflection, or meditation.
We gather here as people who bear witness to both the trouble and the holy trouble all around us. We gather as people who lift up the honest and bracing memory of troubled waters we ourselves have waded dangerously through. Troubled waters that carried us along in a stream not placid nor peaceful nor calm. Spirit of life and source of love. This Sunday morning spent together, let us move with courage into the troubled waters of these our days. Let us be unafraid of the turmoil we fear, of the pressures we face each morning. Let the work that lies ahead challenge us to save what is and has always been worth saving. Let us be unafraid of the trouble all round, or if we must be fearful, let us carry that fear forward into the troubled places as brightly as a torch that leads the way, a white light of moral indignation, a kindling of something yet more powerful. There is trouble in the air. There is trouble in the water. There is trouble in the system. There is trouble in the streets, trouble in the ballot box, and trouble in the halls of power. There is trouble afoot all around us. And when we are tempted to seek after some safe and placid water, concealed from the world by the sheer protective force of cynicism, let us remember that cynicism is just another word for privilege. It is just another strategy to get dragged down. The waters churn and the way leads on. The path is uncertain and the way leads on. The trouble is brewing and the way leads on. And so let us raise our hopes toward all that we dream about and lead on together towards some holy trouble that awaits. May it be so, and amen.
As we spend some time in silence together, those who are mourning a loss or marking the anniversary of a loss are invited to rise in mourning and memory, or to share a loved one's name in the chat. Let us enter the silence together.
For this morning's reading, I'm joined by my daughter, Emily Melgren, and my granddaughter, Julia Williams. We're reading Racist or Antiracist by Ibram X. Kendi. Ironically, Americans who self-identify as not racist, whether they're conservatives, moderates, liberals, radicals, progressives, they don't realize that we're connecting ourselves to a history of slave traders who identified as not racist, although they didn't use that term. We're connecting ourselves to enslavers who said, yes, when we say Black people should be enslaved, when we say slavery is a positive good, when we say slavery is a necessary evil, when we say that Black people are the cursed descendants of Ham, those are not racist ideas. That's God's law. That's science's law. That's nature. That's logic.
We don't realize we're connecting to Jim Crow segregationists who say, I'm not racist. It's separate but equal down here. You can't tell it's separate but equal? We're following the law. We're not racist. We're connecting to eugenicists, who really were the first group of Americans to be classified as racist, who also turned around and said, this is science. This isn't racism. This is science. We have empirical data to demonstrate that Black people are intellectually inferior by nature. Just look at their test scores.
And today we have white nationalists. We have white supremacists who self-identify as not racist. We have white supremacists who, before they go into a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, write a manifesto claiming that the Latinx immigrants are invading Texas, and then also claiming, I'm not racist. We have this long history of racists classifying themselves as not racist. Racists who cannot imagine that they have been reinforcing notions that there's something wrong with a particular racial group. Racists who can't imagine that the policies and policymakers that they're supporting are creating and reproducing racial inequity.
Fundamentally, racism, its heartbeat, has always been denial. And the sound of the heartbeat has always been, I'm not racist. To be more specific, the sound of that heartbeat has always been not racist.
And so, in writing How to Be Anti-Racist, I've had one singular goal. If I could somehow shape the world, what I would hope would come out of this book is very simply that we would eradicate the term not racist from the American vocabulary. And then it would force people to recognize that they're either what? Racist or anti-racist.
It would force Americans to recognize that all policies are either racist or anti-racist. All ideas are either racist or anti-racist. Then we can truly have an accounting of ourselves, of our ideas, of our policies, and of our country. Because at some point, we are going to have to stop denying that we have metastatic racism. Because if you didn't already know, it is literally killing America. It is literally killing this world. The three lethal weapons that are threatening American existence and human existence are, of course, nuclear war, climate change, and bigotry.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory. Glory. Oh, glory. Oh, glory. Glory.
Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapons formed against. Yes, glory is destined. Every day, women and men become legends. Since they go against our skin, become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. Truant living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we women and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots we on the ground, the camera panned up. Pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure. We will be sure. Oh, glory. Hey. Oh, glory. Oh, glory. Now the war is not over. Victory isn't won. We'll fight on to the finish. And when it is all done, we'll cry glory. Oh, glory. Oh, oh, glory. We'll cry glory. Oh, glory. Oh, oh, glory.
Summer is now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They marched with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, heroes, to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, his power was the people. Enemy is lethal, a king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald eagle. The biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing, our music is the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream we had an epiphany. Now we rank the wrongs in history. No one can win the war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. Coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory.
Oh, glory. Glory. Oh, glory. Glory. Oh, glory.
Wow. Thank you, Rachel and Yashasvi, for that powerful anthem, Glory. And I thank all of you for joining us in worship this morning, especially our River Road siblings. This is a wonderful way to come together and mark our commitment to this work of racial justice and being anti-racist. I especially want to also recognize Reverend Amanda Weatherspoon and Cliff Harden and other River Road staff who are also on the chat, and also our Cedar Lane staff, Tim Atkins, Reverend Katie Romano Griffin, Stephanie Williams, and others. It is good to be together. Before I begin, let me just say that it would take way more than a 20-minute sermon to move us from being not racist to being anti-racist. Not that I haven't tried, which I have for over 22 years now, and I'm yet to see that kind of a spiritual and prophetic impact of my words. In fact, I remember early in my ministry at the UUs of Clearwater, I preached a sermon called Why I Am Racist and So Are You. Luckily, they were a wonderful congregation that were very accepting and affirming of my ministry. Otherwise, I would have lost my job there. That's just one story among many of my journey toward wholeness and belonging in this wonderful, beautiful, and broken faith of ours. But my hope this morning is to introduce you to some ideas that might support you on your journey. Because we all arrive from different places in anti-racism work. You know, some of us are already tired of talking about race and systemic racism and white supremacy. Some of us think we are already there and that I'm preaching to the choir. Others of us are still learning not to shut down or turn off when the subject makes us uncomfortable. But many of us are committed to journeying on a new path of learning, deepening, and growing into our highest anti-racist ideals as Unitarian Universalists, especially in this very critical time in our nation. So here goes. On July 17th, civil rights leaders Congressman John Robert Lewis and the Reverend Cordy Tyndall, C.T. Vivian, died hours apart from each other. Both leave behind a legacy of racial justice activism that played a crucial role in shaping America's civil rights movement, the Second Reconstruction. Their deaths come at a critical moment in U.S. history amid a moral, social, and political reckoning on Black dignity and life that represents what Bishop William Barber calls the Third American Reconstruction. Their lives and their work provide lessons for us today on how to be an anti-racist and how to confront and dismantle systemic racism and build the beloved community where all are welcome. So how do we honor their legacy? The late Toni Morrison, in a tribute to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., writes about the time Martin Luther King III, Dr. King's oldest child, asked her, "If you were having a conversation with my father, what would you like to ask him?" Now, for whatever reason, she found herself saying, "I hope he's not disappointed in me." I was not responding, she writes, to the preacher he was, or the scholar he was, or the vulnerable human being he was, nor to the political strategist, the orator, the brilliant risk-taking activist, but I was responding to his mission, his audacious faith. Would he be disappointed in me? The answer isn't important, she continues. But the question really is, and that is the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. He made the act of assuming personal responsibility for alleviating social harm, ordinary, habitual, and irresistible. My tribute to him is the profound gratitude I feel for that gift. End of quote. Like Dr. King, Congressman Lewis had an audacious faith. He made the act of assuming personal responsibility for alleviating social harm ordinary, habitual, and irresistible. So our tribute to him and Reverend Vivian is to express deep gratitude for their gifts, yes, and to commit to do the difficult work, the necessary work of getting in the way of oppression and injustice, of being anti-racist. So what does it mean then to be an anti-racist? First of all, understand what racism and white supremacy mean. In his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi defines racism as a marriage of racist policies and racist ideas that produce and normalize racial inequities. Racism takes several forms and works most often in tandem with at least one other form to reinforce racist ideas, behaviors, policies. Types of racism are individual racism, which refers to the beliefs, attitudes, and actions of individuals that support or perpetuate racism in conscious and unconscious ways. The US cultural narrative about racism typically focuses on individual racism and fails to recognize systemic racism. Then there is institutional racism, which involves policies, practices, and procedures of institutions that result in inequitable opportunities and impacts based on race, produced and perpetuated by institutions. Individuals within institutions take on the power of the institution when they act in ways that advantage and disadvantage people based on race, either consciously or unconsciously. Systemic or structural racism is the overarching system of racial bias across institutions and society. It is the normalization and legitimization of an array of dynamics, history, cultural, institutional, and interpersonal that routinely advantage white people while producing cumulative and chronic adverse outcomes for people of color. It is a system of hierarchy and inequity, primarily characterized by white supremacy. Now, systemic racism is more difficult to locate in a particular institution because it involves the reinforcing effects of multiple institutions and cultural norms, past and present, continually producing new and reproducing old forms of racism. And then white supremacy, which is an historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of nations and people of color by nations and people of the European continent for the purpose of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. End of quote. Now, those who study white supremacy liken it to an iceberg. Slavery, the US genocide of indigenous peoples, the Ku Klux Klan, the neo-Nazis, lynching, hate groups, tiki torches, those are just the visible tip of the iceberg. Below the water surface is where we find the bulk of white supremacy. The structures and systems that are in place that privilege whiteness and white people to protect the status quo. Stuff like the legacy of Jim Crow laws mandating segregation, the new Jim Crow of mass incarceration, police brutality, gerrymandering, the Electoral College, the ongoing impact of redlining and housing discrimination, the longstanding economic inequality, voter disenfranchisement, and much, much more. So being anti-racist means to organize and act against the oppression of Black people, indigenous people, and people of color, and against white privilege. Second, stop saying, I am not racist. Dr. Kendi writes, how many of us say we are not racist after expressing there is something wrong with one of the racial groups, after judging different racial groups from our own socio-cultural standards, after refusing to believe equal opportunity will produce equal outcomes among racial groups, after supporting race-neutral policies that yield racial inequity? Now, I have lost count of how many times I have heard that phrase, I am not racist. I don't have a racist bone in my body, usually followed by the coordinating conjunction, but. I am not racist, but I have read that Black people take advantage of the welfare system more than others. And more recently, I am not racist, but I believe all lives matter. Calling oneself not racist, Dr. Kendi explains, signifies neutrality. You're not a racist, but neither are you against racism. The opposite of racist, he says, isn't not racist, it is anti-racist. So what's the difference? He explains. All policies, ideas, and people are either being racist or anti-racist. Racist policies yield racial inequity. Anti-racist policies yield racial equity. Racist ideas suggest racial hierarchy. Anti-racist ideas suggest racial equality. A racist is supporting racist policy or expressing a racist idea. An anti-racist is supporting anti-racist policy or expressing an anti-racist idea. A racist or anti-racist, he says, is not who we are, but what we are doing in the moment. Third, identify racial inequities and policies that keep them in place. Dr. Kendi says, racist policies are written and unwritten laws, rules, procedures, processes, regulations, and guidelines that maintain racial inequity in every sector of private and public life, including politics, healthcare, the judicial system, education, employment, homeownership, and religion. Being anti-racist means learning about and identifying inequities and disparities that give, in particular, white people or any racial group material advantages over people of color. For example, when Social Security was created in 1935, it excluded domestic and agricultural workers, the majority of whom were Black, which meant that Black workers had less opportunity over the course of decades to accumulate savings and wealth compared to white workers. Other policies that disproportionately provided quote unquote tax-funded wealth building opportunities to white Americans produced similar results for Black Americans. For example, more than 1 million Black World War II veterans were denied the benefits of the GI Bill. So once you've begun identifying racial disparities, examine whether your own views, beliefs, or voting patterns have justified or promoted racial inequity. If you don't know whether your beliefs or views are racist, listen to frontline racial justice activists, advocates, and organizations that have outlined anti-racist positions and policies. Like, for example, the Movement for Black Lives' 2020 policy platform, which in part demands an end to the war on Black people, on Black youth, on Black women, on Black trans, queer, gender nonconforming, and intersex people, on Black health and disabled people, on Black migrants, and demands an end to the death penalty, the war on drugs, pre-trial detention and money bail, and the militarization of law enforcement. Let that listening prompt deeper reflection about why you have believed in certain ideas. Fourth, develop the stomach and spiritual muscles needed to confront and prosecute racist ideas you have held or continue to hold. Dr. Kendi explains that racist ideas make one person responsible for the perceived behavior of racial groups and makes racial groups responsible for the behavior of individuals. And he offers many searing examples of his own racist behavior throughout the book. Now, a racist idea that I hold is the idea that one person can represent an entire community. Let me explain. So every time I hear about a mass shooting or an armed robbery or a murder or any crime, I say to myself, please don't let it be a Black person or a person of color or an immigrant or a Muslim. My fear is that the actions of one person will somehow reflect on the entire community, will somehow reflect on me. Conversely, when a white store worker follows me or my wife down an aisle at a department store, yes, it happens right here in Montgomery County. When we don't know what we want to get, but know that person is thinking that we are going to try to steal something, I think to myself, why don't white people trust us? As if all white people distrust all people of color. This is how racist ideas work. Now, the point Dr. Kendi is trying to make is to stop thinking of the term racist as a pejorative term, and instead to start thinking of it as a simple description, so that we can start proactively engaging in the difficult work of becoming anti-racist rather than get stuck in shame or guilt or denial. Now, one way we could do this is to keep an anti-racism journal that includes daily notes about when we took an anti-racist stance or action, and when we thought or said something racist or stayed silent when we saw something racist or something racist being said or participated in racism. Fifth, understand how your anti-racism needs to be intersectional. Because race intersects with multiple aspects of people's identities, including their gender identity, sexual orientation, age, ethnicity, class, religion, nationality, and immigration status, it is imperative to use an intersectional approach when being anti-racist. Not for altruistic reasons, but out of intelligent self-interest, to quote Dr. Kendi. He explains that it is in the intelligent self-interest of white Americans to challenge racism, knowing they will not be free of sexism, class bias, homophobia, transphobia, and ethnocentrism until Black people are free of racism. Sixth, advocate for anti-racist ideas, policies, and actions. Friends, you cannot think your way into being an anti-racist or read your way into being an anti-racist. You cannot be an anti-racist without action. Dr. Kendi says that one way to act is by getting involved and or supporting organizations in our community that are fighting policies that uphold racial inequities. He also recommends using one's power and privilege to become socially and politically active by getting into a position of power to change racist policies in any setting where they exist, be it government or school or work or a religious community, to work to change policy. The point is to commit to some form of action that has the potential to change racist policies. As Congressman John Lewis would say, if you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something. Being anti-racist is not a one-time event or decision or epiphany or an identity we ever finally and fully achieve or arrive at. It is a commitment, a lifelong commitment, an ongoing practice and process. In his essay, "This is what an anti-racist America would look like. How do we get there?" Dr. Ibram Kendi lays out a powerful vision of an anti-racist society, which is what I close my reflection with. The vision of an anti-racist society where racism is no longer intersecting with other bigotries to manipulate people away from their self-interests, where we reframe the achievement gap as the opportunity gap, where instead of standardizing our tests or closing our schools, we standardize resources and open first-class schools for all, where we honestly share our racial history, where free, high-quality healthcare is as universal as living wages and fresh food, where instead of stocking prisons with poor and mentally disabled people of color, we stock those communities with high-paying jobs and mental health services, where guns are as controlled as police officers fearing for their lives, where voting is easy and accessible for all citizens, where love and hope guide us instead of fear and white fragility, where we recognize biological and behavioral group sameness, where native and immigrant become one, and where all can be fully human through embracing humanity fully. People like Reverend Vivian and Congressman Lewis strove for this vision in how they lived their lives. They have now crossed that final bridge, but we are still here. It is up to us now, together, to continue the work and make this vision of the beloved community a living, vibrant reality. And to that, I say, amen. And the people say, amen.
Please remember those are icon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set freedom here. When the light of commitment sets our burdens falls on knees, when our
Before we close, I'd like to thank everyone who made today's service possible. My colleague, Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd, Tim Atkins, Jessica Sawyer, Emily Melgren, Julia Williams, Laurel Hoa, Doctors Henry Segrishi and Jasmin Lee, Rachel Moore, Jenny Lynn Moyer, Kevin Miller, and Yashasvi Janamanchi. And thank you to our wonderful AV team, Barb Thompson for her technical direction, Don Woodruff, Mike Morse, Michael McCrickard, Todd Chernikoff for creating all those wonderful visuals, the slides, the ingathering, the service slides, and also attending to all the minor details and the major details during the service. Thank you to our membership and pastoral volunteers who have been active in the live chat. Now we'd love for you all to come back after the service and join us at the first combined virtual coffee hour for Cedar Lane and River Road congregations. The link is in the chat, and once we're all in the room, the host will assign you to a random breakout group so that we can have small group social conversations amongst ourselves. Now, I hope you will continue to stay in touch, not just with each other, but also with each other in our congregations, and be engaged in the life of our communities and in the world. May it be so.
Our closing words today are from Congressman John Lewis. These are words that he wrote before his death with the express wish that they be published on the day of his memorial service, July 30th. He writes, "When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state, it is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we called the beloved community, a nation and a world society at peace with itself."
Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it.
Though I may not be with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring.
So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide.
So let us, when we see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something.
Let us, when we make mistakes, when we are wrong, admit we are wrong and seek forgiveness.
Let us tell the truth, the whole truth. Maybe some things that are uncomfortable for people.
Let us be bold, brave, and courageous and find a way to get in the way.
Let us find a way to get in trouble. Good trouble. Necessary trouble. May it be so.
May it be
Amen.
so. Amen.
Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise. Listen to our cries through the pain and lies. Our people gonna rise. Our people gonna sing.
Our people gonna sing.
Our people gonna sing. In spite of everything, hear our freedom ring. Our people gonna sing. Our people gonna fight. people gonna fight for what we know is right. We're marching to the light. Our people gonna fight. Our people gonna breathe. Our people gonna breathe. Our people gonna breathe. Whatever you believe, we have the right to breathe. Our people gonna breathe. Our people gonna pray. Our people gonna pray. Our people gonna pray. Take our rights away. See you on election day. Our people gonna pray. Our people gonna rise. Our people gonna rise. Our people gonna rise. Listen to our cries through the pain and lies. Our people gonna rise. Our people gonna rise. Our people gonna rise. Our people gonna rise. Our people gonna rise.